Okay, I think the proceedings have begun, so I'll just, without more ado, I'll just say that we're here to launch, and you're to hear, hopefully, if you haven't bought copies of this, of John McAnulty's splendid pamphlet, you should do so after this, and he will duly sign it for you. That's the one, yep. And there are several other of his books there too, which I'm sure he'll sign as well. So I will ask him to introduce the work that he has done. I'm not going to talk a lot now. John?
Not so long ago, I bought a book by a guy called Guglielmo Cacciardi called Behind the Crisis. And when I opened the first page, it said, yes, this book's about behind the crisis, but before we get there, we have to discuss dialectics. And it turned out the next 10 chapters were on dialectics. Now, I'm afraid there's a slight trick like that in this meeting. Although it's about Brexit, Ireland on the left, the essential thing that I want to talk about, I want to base the discussion around, is about Marxist analysis. Because if you don't do that, people say, well, Brexit is a good idea, blah, blah, blah. It's a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. And really, it's only an exchange of emotional views and a disagreement. And in fact, that's been a characteristic of the Irish left for, I think, about 20 years now. That people just take positions and there's no real attempt to engage Marxist theory. So, my starting point here is the start of the European Union. And what I would say is across Europe, there was a grand social agreement based on capitalist expansion. And on the back of capitalist expansion, the capitalists were willing to offer reform to the working class. And on the back of that willingness, there grew up social democratic parties and trade unions that were willing to support the state in exchange for the reforms that would be granted and would. And so you had a fairly stable situation that went on for some time. Now, what broke this consensus? Now, there's disagreement about this among Marxists, but I take the position that what broke this consensus was the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Now, if you want to look into it yourself, there's a guy called Mike Roberts who writes a blog called The Next Recession, and he spends all his time showing definitively that the rate of profit has fallen consistently since the late 70s. And despite ups and downs, rallies and collapses, it has not reversed at any stage. So the European Union expanded partly because this consensus still survived, but it was coming under threat because profit rates were falling. So there was two things happening, and one of the things that was happening was that the extension of the European Union guaranteed economies of scale. And that's what the European Union is essentially about. It's about a common border and common regulation within that border that standardises the cost of production and the common market within that. But because the rate of profit was falling, the industry inside the European Union was not generating profit at a rate that could sustain reform. So the European Union flipped from being seen as sort of like a bureaucratic guarantor of minimum rates for workers to enforcing austerity by demanding austerity. The most famous example of that is, of course, the Maastricht Treaty. And the main element of the Maastricht Treaty is that member states must limit public expenditure to 3% of income. which is, and there's a second phase element to that which says, and when they do spend, they must not be unfair to the private sector, which is sort of like the flag of privatisation. Now, so that didn't work. We had the credit crunch, and the outcome of the credit crunch was the decay of social democracy and the decay of trade union moderation, if you like. And alongside that, important for us was a theory on the left and in my own organisation and in my international organisation, which is that there was a space to the left of social democracy. You know, the Social Democrats had left this space, the other left groups could move in and take an opportunity. But in fact, it isn't like a space, it isn't architecture. What it is, it's retreat. So the Social Democrats were retreating as fast as they can, and the people who stepped into their shoes with various broad left formations went on retreat as well. And as far as I can see, they're still retreating. Now, given the weakness of the left and the continuance of the crisis, not unsurprisingly, what you get is a rise of the right. So this is a phenomenon across Europe. It's not in the slightest bit unique to Britain, and it has both the element of racism and anti-migrant sentiment, which are very strong elements, and alongside them you get more traditional anti-worker movements that ride on them. Now, what has the European Union done about that? Firstly, it's made immense concessions to racism and to the flow of migrants. It's taken an extremely barbaric attitude to migrants. Secondly, because it's made these concessions and broken the common regulation, the common rules, there's been a fragmentation of the Union. And that's an immense strategic crisis. And the immense strategic crisis is that the strategy of the European Union was ever closer union. Okay. Ever closer union is simply not a credible call at the minute. And as far as you can discern a strategy, the strategy is for France and Germany to save what they can and squeeze the pips of everybody else. So that's basically the outline of what I think a Marxist view of the European Union would be. What's the Marxist view of Brexit? So I think from what I've said so far, it's clear that Britain is not exceptional, it's not unique. The movements that are growing up in Britain are very similar to a lot of the movements across Europe. And the Brexit vote was an attempt to preserve Tory hegemony, because Farage and company had been growing for years and years, and they were starting to bring, they were getting promises from the Tories. So, for example, Theresa May carried out an absolutely savage attack on migrants, basically meant to placate the right, but it wasn't enough. So Cameron says, I placate them by offering them a vote on Brexit, not expecting that they would win. So they did win. And the Tories have this contradiction. On the one hand, they feel that they need to retain political control of Britain. On the other hand, the actual industrial capital and large parts of the banking capital don't want to leave Europe. There's going to be very bad economic results for leaving Europe. So you had May, and May's attempt was to have a soft Brexit. We bring in a Brexit because these buggers on the right want it. but we'll stay inside the customs union and make it as mild as we can. Now, the discussion inside the Tories made one thing quite clear, and that is that the Brexiteers wanted a hard Brexit, because they had just as much time as May to come up with their proposals for leaving Europe, and they never did. And even Boris has come up with proposals at the last minute, but he had 3 years to come up with proposals. So the actual drive is for leave, get rid of those regulations, bring back the empire, things will be perfect. Boris just wants to be Prime Minister. He has enough sense not to want a hard Brexit, so he's sort of scrabbling to get himself in a position that's hard enough to preserve unity, but doesn't lead to economic collapse. On the Brexiteer side are small-scale capitalists who want, and this is clear from the latest deal, the main thing is out of the customs union and deregulation, and we will lower workers' conditions to the floor, and that way Britain will become great again. And besides them, they've got quite a lot of support from hedge funds managers who are not particularly interested in production, but they, if you've seen the movie The Big Short, they reckon that they can profit immensely over the currency fluctuations that will occur during this time of chaos. I can't remember the latest figures, but I think industrial capital in Britain amounts to about 13%, somewhere between 13 and 17% of the economy. So they are, although they are unanimously opposed to Brexit, they are no longer a dominant force. On the left, what do you have? You have basically a section of the Labour Party. I would say it's led by Lenin Kluski, that has a lot of sympathy with the slogan "British jobs for British workers," and is unwilling to offer full opposition to Brexit. Then you have, within the Parliamentary Labour Party, you have the Blairites, and their position is, as is the Liberal Democrat position, is Europe forever. And if it means unending austerity, that's good enough. In fact, at the time, just before Jeremy came in, the Labour Party, Parliamentary Party, had a discussion where they decided they weren't going to be tricked by the Tories into opposing austerity. And then the third stream is the Corbyn recruits, who essentially, because they're mostly young, recognise the importance of things like free movement of labour for them, and are violently opposed to the things that would follow on from Brexit. But they're far from being a majority anywhere. So I'm trying to make this quick. I don't want to cover it. I want to leave plenty of time. So in Ireland, what you have in Ireland is double dependency. So Ireland is dependent on the European Union and still ruled, no matter what they say, by the Troika. And they're also dependent on the British, who say, "We just stay here and keep your stuff. You don't mind, do you, Paddy?" And that expresses itself economically by a transnational economy which is firmly linked to continued membership of Europe, and then the native economy, which actually in the main is still very, very largely, about 46%, dependent on the British market. And what we've seen is Vlad has pulled all that together, and that's actually the key element of this latest deal, which I'll talk about later if you want, which is that up until he did this deal with Boris, you had a backstop. As long as the sun shall shine and as long as the grass shall grow, this will guarantee the virtual unity of Ireland, although it remains partition today. And what he has granted the British is far, far less. No matter how much people sort of giggle and say, look how discomfited the DUP are. The thing is, what the British wanted was a time-limited backstop. And that's at the centre of this year's deal, is a time-limited backstop. Now, how are we going to deal with this? Like I said, I don't want to talk about my head off. Well, you know, from a Marxist point of view, the working class deal with it. The working class put forward a programme that's in their interest and mobilise around it and take on capitalism. Now, clearly that's not happening. And the main explanation I would take on is I would use the Leninist position, which is that the best way to understand things is through military metaphors. You know, that the working class at some stages advances, at some stages retreats, at some stages has victories, at other stages it has defeats. Now, my analysis would be that the working class in Ireland has suffered absolutely stupendous defeats. And the two main defeats are, one I think you'll all be familiar with, is the defeat of social partnership and of the collaboration between the trade union leadership and the Troika and the liberal capitalist class, which has led to a collapse of opposition to austerity. And the other big defeat, which not everybody recognises, is the collapse of the national question. The national question was an immense radicalising factor in Irish politics, and now we're told it was some sort of big mistake, and really it's cultural differences up in the north that drove all this trouble. And the other problem arising from that is what's called the bootstrap problem, which is that workers don't gradually capture parts of society. Capitalists do. Before the capitalist revolution, there were major centres of capitalist power, and they were providing finance for the nobility. Eventually the nobility got more and more power, and were less able to preserve. But that will not happen to the working class. The working class will have opportunities from time to time to seize power, and they will take them or they don't. I think Connolly said something about that. There are no partial victories in the class struggle. So two more things. I don't want to talk too much. That has to be a global response. You know, during the 70s, it was possible to imagine we could have a temporary republic in Ireland, and there'd be enough around. There were other national liberation struggles. The USSR still in existence. You'd be able to get support. You'd be able to hold out. That's not the case now. You know, although things can start in one area of the globe, they're going to have to go global very, very quickly to be successful. What have we got to do about that? You know, the left, no matter who you count as left, is far too small to be a decisive influence anywhere as far as I can see. But I think what you have to do is have reborn what I've just been talking about, which is the Marxist method, popularise Marxism. And there are people doing that. I've just mentioned Michael Roberts, who has this book called The Next Recession, a series of books like that. There was Lars T. Lee, who rediscovered Leninism for people who didn't know about it, you know. And also, of course, all these things have to be based on struggle, so you have to popularise struggles as well. I mean, how many people know that the IMF proposed an austerity programme in Ecuador about 3 weeks ago, and that programme has collapsed. And it's collapsed because the workers took to the streets and just fought tooth and nail with the state forces until the thing collapsed. I can't think of anything just as dramatic as that. But in the United States, where what you hear mostly about is the madness of Trump, it's actually had the biggest strike wave since the 70s. And that strike wave has actually seen substantial victories. The most substantial ones have been among teachers, especially in California and around that. And if you were going to discuss those things and know about them, the first thing you say, step number one, they kicked the union bureaucracy out of the way so that they could organise, which is not something you'll hear too often in Ireland. Now, I have here a short comment on what the hell's going on today, but I'm not going to say it. I'm going to stop talking for a while, and if later on you want me to throw in part 2, otherwise I'll throw it up on the website at some stage.
Right. Thank you, John. Well, there's plenty of time, I think, and anyone would like to question, make points, please do. And so there's a lot here that we can...
I think it would be good to give your other piece now.
Is that the popular opinion?
Yeah.
Okay, I bow to the will of the masses. I should well have planted that earlier. Right. Oh yes, I found it now. I thought it was somewhere else, right? Right. Okay. So I'm going to make a few points. Point number 1: the proposals put forward today and yesterday make it absolutely clear that the Brexit button is a civil war in England. Right? There's no other explanation, because Theresa May puts together a plan and says what we want is a soft Brexit, and the EU say okay. And she has to go back and fight with the Brexiteers over this soft Brexit. Boris goes over and says, no, we want a hard Brexit. And the EU say, okay. So whatever this debate is about, it's not a debate between Britain and the EU, it's a Britain inside, it's class struggle inside Britain itself, between different sections of the capitalist class. And as I've said already, but it's worth repeating, this inter-class struggle is a feature of Europe overall. I would mention one thing which is maybe somewhat I found interesting, which is a lot of the Eastern Europeans who were trying to build their own Brexit movements have actually retreated from that for 2 reasons. One, they've seen the absolute chaos in Britain unleashed by this. And number 2, they found out that if you press the European leadership hard, they give way. So there's actually sort of minor right-wing internationals of the Eastern Europeans, Poland and so on, some Austria, all determined to push Europe to take up the demands of Brexit without actually Brexiting. Right, thirdly, there's one thing I left out, which is that the new demands, the new proposals, as the Labour Party have actually said fairly clearly, the new proposals, the big difference between those Theresa May proposals is exit from the customs union, and the reason for exit is deregulation. That's the reason. So the Brexiteers are aiming for a very substantial attack on the British working class. The Brexit plan is something like a Singapore off the coast of Europe, holding hands with America and driving up profits by driving down the conditions of workers, which are already extremely low. Now, as I've already said, the key element in this latest proposal that seems to be a scapegoat is a retreat by the Dublin government. Everybody remembers Leo over the past months with the gang of Europe standing behind him, putting Britain in its place and dropping the green flag around him. But he's not doing this for show. The Dublin capitalist class have interests, and one of their main interests is to maintain stability, economic stability. So he sees the chance to do that. Now in the process, no matter what anybody says, the Good Friday Agreement has sunk beneath the waves and is no longer visible. And the only people who are actually calling for the restoration of the Good Friday Agreement are the DUP, who absolutely hate it, but they can't think of anything else to say at the moment. And I think it's worth mentioning that as Vlad the Impaler sells out, Sinn Féin sell out alongside him. They're on radio and TV, and what's their line? Their line is, a deal's better than no deal. In other words, we don't know what we're talking about, but we're not going to fall out of a Fine Gael, and we're going to try and get into the next government by hook or by crook. That's basically what it boils down to. On the other hand, it's worth saying that the DUP have been demoted. Or maybe that's not quite right. It's better to say that the DUP were always far less important than they thought they were. Because the people who run, is that me? No, it's not. Okay, somebody else is guilty. The people who rule the north are the British. As proof of that, everybody can go home and leave Stormont empty, and it doesn't make any difference because the Stormont Assembly didn't run the north. The British run the north, right? So how can we sort of say on one hand, well, Dublin's sold out, but the DUP have taken a tumble? Well, the best way to explain that is in terms of decay. The whole thing can be understood as decaying. Capitalism is decaying, the British state is decaying, the non-Irish settlement is decaying, unionism is decaying, and by the way, Irish nationalism is decaying. Right? And so you can sort of say, well, okay, won't this unionist decay lead to a united Ireland? And I would say no, because the chief unionists will appear from behind the bushes, and the chief unionists will be the Dublin bourgeoisie. And there's already evidence of that, because when the question of United Ireland arises, what do they say? They say, a majority wouldn't be enough. A democratic vote would be very undemocratic. So, they've already ruled out, oh well, if unions goes down the tubes a bit, and there was a vote to give a national, well, that wouldn't be enough, that would be. And in fact, the Good Friday Agreement actually does prevent that. It calls for equality of the two traditions, and that will be recognised. That will either be if there were the question of a massive nationalist vote came in, which is very unlikely to tell the truth. But if it did, there are two obvious answers. One is preserve unionist culture by repartition, or preserve unionist culture by rewriting the Constitution of Ireland so it becomes much more dependent on Britain, and it acknowledges that. So, where does that leave us? It leaves again in the absence of a workers' movement. So, the fundamental elements for building a workers' movement is that they must oppose Britain and the Irish bourgeoisie and Europe. They have to oppose all those things at once in order to have a credible working class programme. And I say all this knowing that just how weak we are at the moment, but you have to take the first step, and the first step is people like us coming together and actually trying to use Marxism to understand events. Ta.
Right then, questions, statements, anything you want to ask John? I think he's covered quite a lot, but